And they knew it at some level. Rob Reiner knew it, and so did Nick, and probably Michelle and Romy and Jake.
Jake Reiner thought this Christmas would finally fix everything. He had it all lined up. The dinner table ready, lights glowing, music perfect, every detail locked in. In his head, he saw it clearly, sitting with his parents again in their Brentwood home after years of distance, like nothing had ever broken. Then December 14th hit, and that picture collapsed in seconds. One phone call flipped his life upside down. His parents, Rob Reiner and Michelle, were gone, and the shock turned brutal when he heard the name tied to it, Nick Reiner, his younger brother. The same brother Jake had sworn to protect no matter what. The pain wasn't just grief, it was disbelief mixed with raw anger. Not long after, Jake went on KCBS and said something that froze the room. "I warned my parents beforehand," he admitted. "I was afraid one day he'd do something that couldn't be undone." That wasn't emotion talking. That was years of tension finally snapping. It was the sound of trust collapsing after a lifetime of silence. Jake finally spoke about what had been eating him alive for years. The favoritism, the endless excuses, the blind loyalty that always protected Nick. He said it didn't come out of nowhere. It built slowly, mistake after mistake, until the family couldn't hold together anymore. So, when Nick called from custody, pleading, claiming innocence, begging Jake to help with bail, Jake didn't flinch. He said no, not out of spite, but because deep down he knew this family had been cracking for years, and Nick was the break that could never be sealed again. By December 17th, Los Angeles felt heavy and lifeless under a quiet sky. As Nick climbed the courthouse steps across town, Jake sat under the harsh studio lights at KCBS, the place he'd worked for most of his life. Cameras rolling, lights blazing, emotions locked down as hard as he could manage. The lights carved shadows into his face, making him look thinner, sharper, worn down. His eyes were hollow from nights without sleep. The dark suit clung to his tall, slightly hunched frame, like his body had learned to carry weight it was never meant to hold.
If anyone calls me a Sally because I'm a snail and I'm never gonna fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
At some point with a child where you want to will things to be true, right?
Mhm.
That you think you can command things to happen, and you can't. And the most insecure you'll feel, the most vulnerable you'll feel as a parent is knowing there are some things that are outside of your.
This wasn't the clean, confident reporter people were used to seeing. This was a man stretched thin by loss, pressure, and years of swallowing words he was never allowed to say out loud. He sat straight, but his body told the truth. Shoulders tight, hands clenched together on the desk, knuckles pale from gripping too hard. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. Rough like every word had to force its way out. "I've sat here through so many long nights," he said, "but never one like this." And that's when the past started spilling out. Memories came in uneven waves as Jake talked about growing up with the Reiner name, a name that made other people smile, but always felt too heavy for him. Like wearing a coat 3 sizes too big, impressive from the outside, suffocating on the inside. Jake Reiner was born May 6, 1991 in Los Angeles into a world filled with art and storytelling. His father, a legendary director, and his mother, a talented photographer, surrounded him with creativity from day one. As the oldest child, he grew up around constant laughter, film talk, and family legends. His grandfather, Carl's humor echoed through the house, stories and old reels everywhere. On the surface, it looked warm, exciting, almost unreal, but it wasn't perfect, not even close. Jake grew up with his younger sister and his little brother Nick. Being the oldest meant learning early how to step aside. He gave up space, attention, and eventually parts of himself. It was like his role had already been written before he ever got a say. Nick was smaller, quieter, more fragile. So, Jake learned to shrink himself. He gave up his favorite toys, moved out of his own room, and learned to stay quiet when things went wrong. Anytime Jake tried to speak up, someone would say, "He's still little." And Jake would nod, swallowing it all like that was his job. Being the big brother meant locking everything inside. Nick drew more concern, more protection, more focus. When Nick got upset, the whole house shifted. Conversations stopped. Laughter disappeared. Jake learned to retreat into silence just to keep the peace. "I'm fine," Jake would whisper to himself. Even though nobody asked, that phrase became armor. What started as love slowly turned into erasing who he was. But talk about Gilefest. His parents adored Nick, but it came from fear, the kind that holds too tight. They defended him, explained things away, believed patience would fix everything. But for Jake, that patience came at a cost: his voice. He still remembered moments when Nick's outbursts were brushed off with a laugh, while Jake learned to carry the weight quietly again and again, like nothing was ever that serious. Michelle would pull Nick close, whispering, "He's just having a hard time." Jake stood right there watching, understanding, but feeling something else grow inside him. A quiet distance that kept stretching wider with every year. He never blamed his parents for how they loved Nick. Deep down, Jake knew it came from protection, from fear, from wanting to keep him steady when he slipped. But as Jake got older, that weight didn't disappear. It landed squarely on his shoulders. He became the anchor, the calm one, the one who sacrificed, who never caused problems, who swallowed everything. "I'm used to it," he once told his mother, half joking, half serious. Michelle smiled, not realizing those words weren't casual at all. They were a quiet signal, one nobody stopped to hear. Baseball became Jake's safe place, a family ritual that felt untouchable, passed down from grandfather to father to son. Rob would take Jake to Dodger Stadium, the two of them side by side under the California sun, inning after inning like time had slowed down. "My father passed his love of baseball to me, and I passed it to Jake," Rob once said proudly, tearing up while talking about Coopertown trips and Hall of Fame memories. Those moments were real joy, pure father and son connection. But even in those bright memories, Nick's shadow never left. Jake's teenage years stayed tied to his younger brother, no matter how far he tried to step away. When Nick was 15, things started shifting. At first, it was subtle. Tired eyes, strange moods. Nights he disappeared without explanation. Jake noticed everything. He thought, "He's trying to say something. He's asking for help." But that quiet signal got drowned out as the chaos grew louder. Year after year, Jake watched Nick move from school to recovery programs, and right back to square one. Every time Nick said, "I'll do better for real," hope sparked again. Jake could still picture those dinners. Nick's hands shaking, voice unsteady but sincere. Rob would nod softly. Michelle would squeeze Nick's hand like that promise was the only thing keeping them upright. Jake wanted to believe too badly, but part of him was scared because he believed too many times already. But, Rob Reiner didn't give up. He kept going. It ended in absolute tragedy, but the effort was clearly that you can see it in that piece, by the way, beautifully written, and I think just got to the absolute heart of the issue, is that they were willing something to happen that was not going to happen. He used all his life to bring stories to us, to bring healing to other people, in some instances like Stand By Me, and tried to use it on his own family. Like the power of putting something cathartic on the big screen. He would help his son do that with his own story. But he knew. I think he knew. The hardest part wasn't just watching Nick struggle. It was watching his parents slowly burn out. Each setback drained them more, and Jake saw it clearly. Rob started aging fast. His shoulders slumped under quiet worry. Conversation shortened. Silence filled the gaps. Michelle lived on edge, waiting for calls, messages, any sign that Nick was okay somewhere out there. Every day became a test of hope versus heartbreak. There is day. Jake stood in the middle, feeling that fear wrapped tighter around the family. One night in the kitchen, Jake overheard his mother say through a trembling voice, "As long as he's still breathing, I won't give up." That line hit hard. Love mixed with desperation, raw and heavy. And there were nights Nick came home completely out of control. Jake watched as his father instinctively stepped between them, becoming a shield for both sons behind closed doors. Michelle cried quietly, hiding it so Nick wouldn't see. That's when Jake realized this wasn't normal family life anymore. They weren't living, they were surviving hour by hour. "We have to save him," Rob once said firmly. Jake stayed silent. Deep down, one thought scared him more than anything. Who saves the ones doing all the saving? Ta-da. During those years, Jake learned to stay quiet and observant, taking everything in, saying very little. The idea of leaving home crept in, not to escape, but to breathe again. Fame didn't excite him. It freaked him out. Living publicly while hiding private chaos felt impossible. Jake once stood backstage watching bright lights hit others and asked himself quietly, "What if this path isn't mine?" That question followed him for years like a shadow. People admitted they cried watching it. Even viewers who had never known the Reiner family said it felt too intimate, too raw, like stepping into someone else's private pain. Some couldn't finish it the first time. A few said they turned the TV off halfway through, then turned it back on minutes later, unable to look away. This wasn't news anymore. It was pain laid bare, unfiltered, impossible to ignore. One viewer wrote online, "I watched the news to understand other people's lives, but tonight I felt like I was witnessing pain no one should ever have to carry in public." That comment captured everything. Across social media, the reaction exploded, but not with arguments or noise. It was heavy, emotional, honest. People spoke from the gut. On one side was collective grief for Rob Reiner, whose work had brought joy and comfort to generations, now overshadowed by unbearable tragedy. On the other was heartbreak for Jake and Roy, the children left to carry wounds no one prepares you for. They didn't just lose their parents. One viral comment read, "They lost the idea of what family is supposed to be." Thousands responded with hearts, tears, and messages from strangers who suddenly felt connected. That report became more than a story for many homes. It turned into a wake-up call. People hugged tighter that night. Some picked up the phone to call a sibling, a parent, a friend, just to hear their voice. Jake's pain reached far beyond his own life. It hit something universal, a reminder that the deepest heartbreak doesn't always come from the outside world. It comes from inside the place we trust the most. In the days that followed, Jake's nights became battles. Sleep brought no rest. The same memories replayed again and again. His parents, his warnings, the words that went unheard. One thought kept clawing back. 3 months. Just 3 months ago, I said everything I could. If only they had listened. If only they had been more careful. The grief didn't fade. It burned, relentless and heavy. From the outside, Jake Reiner's life had always looked perfect. Respected journalist, rising actor, legendary last name. But strip all that away, and what remained was painfully human. A man who carried silence too long, who saw danger coming, who warned everyone and was ignored. That's what made the pain impossible to escape. It wasn't just loss. It was knowing he saw it coming. That knowledge became its own punishment. Jake didn't only lose his parents. He lost faith in the belief that love and warnings are always enough. The idea that family alone can fix everything shattered completely. Awards, roles, recognition, none of it mattered now. One question drowned out everything else. If they had listened to me that day, would things be different? Jake now lives with a wound time can't touch. One made of grief, guilt, and love that will never feel complete. When he spoke out, it wasn't for attention or sympathy. It was his last attempt to turn unbearable pain into a warning for others, hoping no one else would have to live with the same silence and regret. The truth his story leaves behind is uncomfortable, but real. Family isn't built on love alone. It's built on listening, on seeing clearly before things break beyond repair. Some warnings don't get second chances. Some holidays never come back the same. If you stayed until the end of this story, thank you. This wasn't easy to hear. If Jake's journey made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own family, your own pain, or your own strength, share it in the comments. Not to judge, but to connect. And if you want more stories that go deeper than headlines, stories about real people and real consequences, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Your support keeps these conversations alive.